This world we live in is crazy. As to which, Gil, you responded. You said, you should thank us for the convo so second options and thirds get a fair judgment. Klay with 4 rings left off the top 75. Pippen has 6 rings and sits 32 all time. 6 people in front of him with no rings. Why? Exclamation point. Not my opinion. It's my research that exposed they don't respect second option rings. So,
come at my friend like that?
No, I'm not coming at him. What am I coming at? We're not done. That's just the first part.
Right.
It all kicked off with a simple but explosive idea from LeBron James on his podcast. He basically asked, what if we've got this whole ring culture thing wrong? What if winning a championship, which is a team accomplishment, shouldn't be the only thing we use to measure a player's greatness? He brought up legends like Allen Iverson, Charles Barkley, and Steve Nash, and asked if we can honestly say they weren't incredible players just because they never got a ring. That one comment lit a fuse across the NBA world. But it was Gilbert Arenas, the former All-Star and one of the loudest voices out there, who took that spark and poured gasoline on it. His passionate defense of LeBron is what finally pushed a 4-time NBA champion right over the edge. Gilbert Arenas lit a fire under Draymond Green, and Draymond's response was absolutely savage. Green jumped on social media with a message that was sharp and clear. A bunch of non-champions having championship conversations. This world we live in is crazy. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was personal. Today, we're breaking down this clash of philosophies. A battle between a champion who believes rings are the price of admission to the GOAT debate and a star who says the whole system is broken. To really get why Draymond went off, you first have to understand what Gilbert Arenas was actually arguing. This wasn't just some random hot take. Arenas came with what he called his research. On shows like First Take and his own podcast, Gil's Arena, he laid out a case that the NBA world doesn't truly value rings the way it claims to. His knockout punch to the whole system was this: nobody respects your rings unless you were the #1 option on the team. He said it bluntly, they don't give 2 shits about second option rings. His best example, Scottie Pippen. Here's a guy with 6 rings, a defensive monster, an all-NBA lock for years. Yet, when ESPN put out its own all-time player ranking, Pippen, with all 6 of his championships, was ranked at number 32, just 1 spot behind Allen Iverson at 31, a player with 0 rings. Arenas' point is that the rules keep changing. If rings are the ultimate measure of greatness, how does a 6-time champion end up ranked lower than a guy who never won? It proves that things like cultural impact and individual dominance, like Iverson's 4 scoring titles and MVP award, often matter more in these legacy debates. Then, he turned his attention to the NBA's official 75th anniversary team. Now, that list wasn't ranked, but it sparked its own massive debate. Arenas pointedly asked Draymond why his own teammate Klay Thompson, a guy with 4 rings, was left off that list entirely. Meanwhile, players with way less team success but more individual awards made the cut. To Arenas, this is the evidence, this is the research. The very institutions that are supposed to define greatness are telling us, with their own lists, that a player's individual resume is what really counts. He argues that a ring is just a tiebreaker, not the main event. You need the individual status first, the all-NBA teams, the all-star nods, the championship, especially if you're not the guy, is just a cherry on top. It's a powerful argument that calls out the hypocrisy in how we value players. He's basically saying the game is set up to only respect the driver of the car, while the passengers, no matter how many rings they have, will always be an afterthought. Draymond Green heard all of this, the talk about research, second options, and inconsistent lists, and he wasn't having any of it. For Draymond, this isn't some academic discussion. It's a complete failure to understand what it takes to win at the highest level. His response essentially told Arenas that his research is worthless because it's missing the one perspective that actually matters, a champion's. In a direct shot on social media, Green wrote, "Only someone who has never been a champion would think that's a conversation that would ever matter." That one sentence is the heart of Draymond's entire argument. He believes there's a certain knowledge, a level of sacrifice, that you can only understand if you've actually climbed that mountain and won a title. From his perspective, players who haven't won are like people who've only read books about war, trying to tell a general what combat is like. They can have all the stats and research in the world, but they're missing the lived experience that defines it all. He made it crystal clear he would never thank Arenas or any other non-champion for starting this conversation, because from where he's sitting, it's a conversation that has no meaning.
There would never be a reason for me to thank y'all about anything involving the game of basketball. Not one particular thing. He said anything involving the game of basketball. Not one thing. Not even the Gilbert Arenas provision in the CBA. Nothing. There's also nothing you guys can say or topic y'all can cover that can change anything for me when it comes to the game of basketball or the NBA. Only someone who has never been a champion would think that that's a conversation that would ever matter. Your research was just missing one key perspective, a champion that understands what it means and takes to do so. So it's just a tad bit flawed.
The part that really seemed to set Draymond off was when the discussion turned to Kobe Bryant, with some suggesting that other players could have done what he did. Green was furious, firing back with, "Talking about you could have done what Kobe did? The F out of here. Don't ever disrespect being like that." For Draymond, that's where the line is. Winning championships, especially as the clear leader, is what separates legends like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Tim Duncan from everyone else. It's not just about stats or all-star games, it's about having the will and the clutch gene to drag a team to a title over and over again. To even suggest that someone who hasn't done it could understand that pressure, in his eyes, is the ultimate disrespect. He believes you can't just talk about winning, you either do it or you don't. And if you don't get a seat at the table when the greatest of all time are being discussed. All right, so you've heard both sides of this thing. On one side, you have Gilbert Arenas coming with the receipts, pointing out how inconsistent we are when we talk about championships. On the other, you have Draymond Green, the four-time champ, saying that if you haven't won, your opinion on winning is basically irrelevant. This gets to the very heart of how we define greatness in basketball. So I gotta ask you, who are you rocking with? Are you Team Arenas, thinking that individual brilliance gets pushed aside for a flawed obsession with rings? Or are you with Draymond, believing that championships are the only true test of a legend? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, and while you're there, if you're digging this breakdown, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us get these discussions out to more fans, and I appreciate every single one of you. Now let's get back to it. So who's actually right in this thing? The truth is, it's messy because both Draymond and Arenas are making good points that tap into a bigger divide in how we all watch the NBA. But let's start with Arenas. His logic is pretty solid. When you look at the evidence, the inconsistencies are obvious. The ESPN Top 75 list does have players with fewer or no rings ranked higher than multi-time champions. It backs up his claim that the voters, media, ex-players, execs are looking at more than just a ring count. They're weighing individual awards, stats, and straight-up cultural impact. Think about it. Charles Barkley and Allen Iverson completely changed how their positions were played. Their influence is still felt today, which is why they're so revered even without a title. Arenas is right that the conversation around rings is often chaotic and doesn't follow a clear set of rules. But then you've got Draymond's point of view, which is less about data and more about a truth you can't measure with stats. Winning a championship is the hardest thing to do in basketball, period. It demands a level of sacrifice, chemistry, and mental toughness that goes way beyond individual numbers. When we talk about the absolute greatest, the Mount Rushmore of the sport, the conversation always revolves around players who led their teams to multiple championships. Michael Jordan's 6 rings, Kobe's 5, Tim Duncan's 5. Those aren't just stats. They're the ultimate proof of their greatness. They showed up and won when it mattered most. Even Draymond has said that guys like Chris Paul and Charles Barkley deserve respect, but he stands by the idea that championships are what move a player into that God-tier GOAT territory. This whole beef also shines a light on something we're seeing more and more: the player as pundit. Fans are giving more weight to the opinions of guys who have actually been in the fight. The success of podcasts from players like Draymond, JJ Redick, and Shannon Sharpe shows that people want that authentic first-hand perspective. Draymond's argument is so powerful precisely because he is a champion. He can talk about the pressure of a Game 7 or the vibe in a championship locker room in a way that most people just can't. At the end of the day, they might be talking past each other a little bit. Arenas is breaking down how legacies are judged by fans and media and pointing out the flawed logic. Draymond is talking about how legacies are earned on the court and defending the sacredness of the ultimate prize. But what's the takeaway? This blow-up between Draymond Green and Gilbert Arenas has pulled the curtain back on the biggest argument in basketball. What really makes a player great? Gilbert Arenas, building on what LeBron first said, makes a strong case that ring culture is a broken, media-driven narrative that overlooks context and individual genius. His research into the NBA's own honors shows that we're often hypocrites, putting players with 0 rings over champions who weren't the #1 guy. He's asking for a smarter, more complete look at a player's career. But Draymond Green's comeback just hits different because it comes from a place of experience. His position is that championships aren't just another line on a resume, they are the final exam. Winning is the entire point of the sport, and the players who do it consistently as leaders are in a class of their own. He's arguing that there's a conversation for the Hall of Fame, and then there's a much smaller VIP conversation for the greatest of all time, and a handful of rings is your ticket to get in that room. You just can't talk about the legacies of Jordan, Kobe, or LeBron without counting their titles. Ultimately, this whole thing proves there isn't one simple answer. Greatness is a mix of everything: dominance, stats, impact, and yes, winning. Maybe the real problem is the end-all be-all mentality that LeBron criticized in the first place. Maybe greatness isn't one single peak, but a whole mountain range with different summits. You can be an all-time great without a ring, but if you want to be in the conversation for the single greatest of all time, the hardware on your fingers still says it all. The debate is going to keep going, but one thing is clear: in the NBA, the talk about rings will never ever stop. What do you all think is the most important part of a player's legacy? Drop your final thoughts below.